Hi and welcome to Language Leaders Live. This is a session where we like to go deep into a subject or a topic area that is important to language leaders around the world, and what could be a more topical and interesting area to delve into than AI, and particularly into how it is impacting content generation and curriculum development. In the language learning space, materials are critical to the experience that we can deliver to our students, particularly when, and in this case, I think we're really going to be talking about content that's in class, used with a student, but it could also be used for self-study and a variety of other kind of mechanisms. And we can kind of talk through that in today's session. But let me just introduce you to the panel here, which is quite extraordinary. We have, of course, some familiar faces, which I'll wrap off very quickly. Herbert Gerzer from Learn Media.
Hi.
We have Korinne Algie from KorinneAlgie.com. And some guests that you may or may not be familiar with. Brian Kantt is my co-author of LangTech. He's a very, went to Harvard, has studied learning sciences, has run a very successful language business called Iboux, so has a lot of experience in that. We have Rob Szabó, who is a very experienced teacher turned everything under the sun up through the ranks of Learnship, and is now the VP of Learning Sciences, if I'm correct, Rob?
Yeah, that's right.
And we have Julia as well from the inlingua group. Julia, you're leading their, is it the content and curriculum team there? Or do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that role?
Yeah, so I'm responsible for the language learning materials at Inlingua International. We have about 250 schools globally and produce materials across 5 languages, so lots to do.
So on this panel, you have somebody that is focused on particularly like general online language education. We have B2B language education, and we also have probably a mix of all the above with these companies, but we also have somebody that's very much in-person language teaching as well. So we've got a great mix here. I'm very excited about the first question. Herbert, why don't you kick us off?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of people, when they think about or hear AI, they kind of picture ChatGPT, but AI and generative AI is so much more than just ChatGPT. So I'd love to ask the panel, what is generative AI?
Basically, AI is really the simulation of human intelligences. Just broadly, what we're talking about with generative AI is when a computer program or system can generate, in this case, content. It can be in the form of text, it can be in the form of imagery, and we're also seeing more and more generative AI when it comes to video. But it's this concept of creation, of authoring, that is very new. And it might be authoring from a baseline of trained data. So when we're talking about generative AI, we're also kind of talking about some of the brand names that, again, nobody knew before November of last year, and now is on everybody's lips. We're talking ChatGPT, we're talking Claude, we're talking Microsoft's Edge and Bing service. And there's so many other kind of tools that are coming out there. And in fact, I think that's an interesting conversation of what different types of technology have we tried and what different outputs are we getting from that. But that in essence is what generative AI is about. And I think why it's so interesting to now, and if any of my panelists want to kind of back me up, is because content creation has been one of those things that we do well before the class. You know, we standardize a lot of our materials, we create these textbooks, we create this content in anticipation for the students that we've never met. And generative AI is the ability to create almost instantaneous content that could be personalized for a particular student or a particular group of students, and it can be customized and tweaked depending on their motivations, their needs, their interests, and a whole bunch of other factors. Has anyone else kind of got some better ways of explaining this, or particularly the implications for the language industry?
I think it's an important point, Alex. Sorry, I think the traditional publisher pipeline is pretty long. So I think they typically know what they're putting in the world 3-4 years in advance. I think they've struggled to keep up, to be honest. I think, fewer people are buying traditional course books. I think it's difficult for them to make the digital transition. And I think if you are providing digital training, it can be a bit frustrating waiting for the traditional publisher scene to catch up. So I think this is something that there's been demand for a number of years, and it's come at the right time, essentially.
Yes, and I think like what you guys all said, it's already like a really, really good and thorough explanation. I perhaps like something interesting to add is that generative AI is actually not new. It's been around since the 60s, and like chatbots are a form of generative AI as well. I think that what has really changed recently is that the content it creates is for the first time, it's convincingly authentic, and that changes everything.
Excellent.
It's so true. And I think, for the first time also, because it's become so accessible, people are really, really interested. And it's exactly what you said, Rob. Our customers are asking. They're asking, what are you doing? What is it that you can deliver now? Because there are all these people, that are using it. And what are you guys doing? And so I think it's highly important that we keep up with it.
Yeah.
One of the key questions I have for you, Brian, actually, because we talked about it so much with our development of the LangTech book, was this concept as well the differentiation between content and curriculum. And you kind of drilled this into me, which is why I'm asking you. But can you help us just make that differentiation? Because generative AI kind of does very different tasks in those two different spheres.
Sure. Yes, of course, like there's no universal definition, of curriculum, but the working definition that I like to use is curriculum is not just class materials. So curriculum is comprised of 4 elements. It's basically an umbrella for class materials, methodology, goals, and assessment. So people sometimes use curriculum and class materials interchangeably. That's fine. As long as the other person understands what you mean. But when you really want to dig deeper into for example, what we're going to discuss today, like what are the implications of generative AI in curriculum, we have to make sure that we understand that we're not just talking about class materials or content creation. We're also talking about methodology. What are the implications for methodology? What are the implications for assessment? And what are the implications for defining the learner's goals? I think all these 4 elements, they sort of like interact with each other, and AI or generative AI will impact all of them, each and all of them individually.
So maybe we sort of jump into how it's actually used. Like, how can it generally be used to create personalized language content? Like, what does that look like? Maybe, Rob, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you've kind of approached it?
Yeah.
Because you'll also have individual learners and group learners, right?
Yeah, absolutely, we have. It's actually a nice moment for me to talk about it, because we've just implemented internal training. So at Learnship, we have a publishing team, and we've just done internal training of all the writers in using generative AI tools, actually. So basically, we had specific requirements from certain clients for specific purpose courses. These are 20 sessions of 60 minutes long, and there's a whole range of different outcomes that people are looking for, things like storytelling, things like tax, and so on. And typically, when you are a English teacher as a foreign language, you may be intimidated by saying, look, I don't know anything about controlling, or logistics, or any of these specific purpose areas. And what we've done is basically, and a colleague of mine, Rory Bradle, has been spearheading this movement, but basically creating a series of prompts for ChatGPT. And as Brian says, at the highest level, which is curriculum, which is what is addressed in which sequence, and so on. And then the individual content pieces, all using ChatGPT as a tool. But the editor basically would then define the curriculum using ChatGPT with specific prompts. And then we have specific prompts for each activity type. So whether that's a drop-down or a gap fill or a matching or whatever, we specify a certain target language, which needs to be included. And we specify basically the methodology that we want to use. We use task-based learning with a before, during, and after approach. And we even generate trainer notes through this process. And then obviously there's an editing phase. which is very, very important. So one of the things is the prompts. Now that's defined up front. We have a Notion space where we have the prompts laid out as guidance for the writers. And then the editing basically, firstly by the writers, and then a further quality assurance phase by the relevant editor before it goes for design and layout. And as I say, this workflow is now in place, and we are actively creating material using it. So, yeah.
That's amazing, Rob. And I think it's sort of showing some sophistication in how you're building out, not just can I generate content, but can I create systems that allow me to create content, which I feel is a very big difference. And in fact, I might just provide those listening or watching in today, actually, just a very brief idea of what that looks like in practice. So in ChatGPT, it looks more or less like this. You'll have this prompt place, and in your case, it might be more sophisticated, Rob. It might be using their playground and kind of putting that inside your own service, so you can kind of build up those systems. But if you're just wanting to play with prompts, this is kind of more or less what you'll see is ChatGPT or Claude or Google Bard or whichever one you want. We can talk about different technologies. But what's a good example of a well-structured prompt? You kind of mentioned those elements, Rob, so I might even just kind of edit this one a little bit better.
If you tell the tool what it is, you are a writer, you are an editor, you are a language learner at this level, it helps it. But the specifics are very interesting. So the prompts that we have, we took quite a long time to create through a lot of iteration. Yeah, but telling it who it is helps.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that I'm always extremely fixated on, because the output is just so different. The other things that are, of course, important, like in this particular prompt, I've put, as an expert English language teacher, generate a short reading comprehension exercise for an A2 student from Spain based on going to a rock concert. So that's an example of one, and you could be creating exercise. You could do a whole lot of other things here.
Yeah, but you can give it a vocab list.
Nice.
That it needs to include.
So you could say include these vocab words, which might be guitar, drums, ticket. Great. And so when you click save, out will pop the exercise. In fact, we've got some questions here and some vocabulary words. So a great example of how quickly this can do it. I'm going to put a pin in this question as well, because the difference between ChatGPT 4 and ChatGPT 3.5, and you have basically the 3.5, which is the free version, and 4, which is the paid version, can lead to some quite differing results. And it's worth kind of playing with that. And that's why I'm putting a pin in it for later, because I know we've got a question on it. But I think that is a great way, I think, Nate, for us to kind of set the stage of what we're talking about with generative AI and how impressive these tools are becoming.
Yes.
So let's go back into our next set of questions, which was on, we've kind of narrowed into what are the best ways to use these tools. And I think you're talking about keeping some structure in your prompts and creating systems is the second takeaway. Brian or Julia, are there any other kind of tips you have for how to use content, generative AI tools?
Yes, sure. I mean, the example you guys just gave is great, because basically what this changes in language learning is that we are no longer stuck, so to say, with a one-size-fits-all curriculum. So basically, what generative AI does is it provides, you can take any exercise or any piece of content, and you can sort of like iterate so that it provides multiple options for representation. So basically, several learners have different ways of learning, different ways of absorbing content, different ways of understanding. And you can basically take any piece of whatever content you're given to teach a class, and just have the AI generated over and over, sort of like what Rob just described, in a way that fits what the learner needs. It also provides multiple means of engagement. because there's different ways in which you can recruit the learner's interest. So, and that of course is not the same for everyone. So I think that the main, I guess, like the main role of generative AI at the moment in language learning is this capacity, at least as it refers to content creation, this capacity to just take a piece of content and do whatever you want with it, and just feed it prompts so that it fits your learners' needs in terms of how they absorb or how they need the content to be represented, but also what their needs for engagement are, or even multiple options for assessing the learner, or maybe just iterate the methodology that you're using to present that content, so that, again, it fits the learner's needs and goals.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to add here, because this example is, you know, here you've worked with something that was already there, kind of thing. And I don't know about you guys, but when I have to start something from scratch, I have massive blank page dread. And it sort of blocks my mind. And I found it really useful, you know, just start somewhere, just prompt and then read what it generates, and then tweak it with another prompt and another prompt and another prompt. Or you tweak it yourself, and that has helped me immensely.
Yeah, I think we're definitely touching on the when you think about productivity in a content team, and again, Brian, all of you three will have far more experience than I do. The productivity is probably determined in a big way. It's like that writer's block, like, oh, what am I going to come up with? When you remove that, that is a huge win for how much content and good content you can still create just by having that. I would sort of also just say some tips are as well, rather than asking it to write the long, big sets of paragraphs and blocks of content. I think typically it works sometimes better to ask it to bullet point concepts, and then once you're happy with what it's gonna do, then allow it to sort of build it out. So that I think is helpful. Brian, you kind of touched on the idea of versioning and kind of asking it to try again. Even just literally writing in that can, there's basically tools where you can just hit a refresh to get another version of that. I think that can make a big difference in terms of the output that you get. So with that in mind as well, are we mainly, out of the three here, are we mainly talking ChatGPT, and if so, 3.5 or 4? And otherwise, you know, are there other generative AI services that you've tried, whether that be Claude, Bard, Bing Chat, or others that you've felt that have done either as good or a better job? Rob, what about in your case, since you'll probably have the most sophisticated systems so far in terms of this being incorporated as part of your content generation?
So sorry, Alex, what was the question again?
The different types of technology. Are you mainly using ChatGPT as your main language?
Yeah, and something called Copy AI.
Okay.
Well.
Yeah.
I mean, because the first application we used for it, Alex, was just actually to write texts. So at that stage, we weren't using it for questions at all, or for curriculum structure or anything like that. And then we sort of broadened our usage. But I mean, Copy AI is a tool, I think, designed for copywriters, right? And you see it all over websites and so on.
Yeah.
So yeah. Otherwise, you know, we use a whole range of AI tools. Also, we use something called Murph.ai. I don't know if that's relevant, but that's text to speech. It's a very nice tool because it actually gives you the ability to change intonation and stress. Because often what makes you know, text to speech robotic is because the stress is in the wrong place. For example, in English, you have sometimes cases where the same word is both a noun and a verb, for example, or yeah. So we use a bunch of tools. Yeah.
Brian or Julia?
Yes, I mean, also this is not just for chat, but I mean, we also need to think of Midjourney, for example, or what it can do for image creation. Exactly, because so much of language learning and class materials is visual, and there's so much you can do with an image. So just the fact that you can basically version an image infinitely to fit and instantly, so to fit whatever you're doing in the class, It's just yeah, I mean, you could basically do a whole class just with several versions of that image.
Yeah, we're actually going to be, I'm doing a Get More Students podcast on Midjourney and how to use it. But just looking at some of the differences you get with, say, a generative AI tool for image generation, you can actually then really put your brand into the images, because you're no longer requiring stock images, which was basically whatever you could get that seemed relevant. Effectively, you can use Brian. You could be my model for all of my future images. And it starts creating, again, some really new, interesting opportunities for content generation of non-publishers, really, to build out their content. Very interesting stuff. Out of curiosity, Rob, have you noticed any difference at all between, say, the free version of ChatGPT or the paid version in terms of the output for your teaching materials?
No, I don't think so. It's still relatively early days for us. I mean, we're using a paid subscription, although I think we use the free version for the internal training.
Yeah,
I think it's a more updated database that it draws on, Alex. But so it may be that there's a little bit less time spent in the editing phase.
Yeah,
but we put a lot of stress on editing before we put anything out there in the world. So I guess we'll get more efficient as it goes on. But right now, we treat whatever comes out of the machine with skepticism.
I think that's a great tip, by the way. Please stay very skeptical about what pops out, because it's very confident and not necessarily very confident about that. Have you noticed, and I don't know if you've, particularly you were all as educators here, do you feel it does a fairly good job of reorienting, or repurposing a piece of content to a different language proficiency? So for example, Rob, okay, you found that very good. We're getting some nods there. Julia and Brian, are you happy with what it comes out with? If it's starting at a C1 and then you go, hey, actually, can you dumb this down to a beginner, maybe an A2 level? Are you happy with that output?
Yeah, so we, like the content that we're creating right now, we created 3 proficiency levels. So it's an A2, B1, and then a sort of B2+, which is an advanced kind of level. And we would do each theme on 3 difficulty levels. And yeah, I mean, sentence length, complexity, vocabulary choice, all that. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Needs editing, and sometimes it makes weird decisions, but
excellent. Julia,
and not just I think not just with regards to level, but also theme or topic. So if you have a student who might not be particularly motivated because the subject you talk about is just boring to them, you can easily take a language point and have something generated that suits their interests.
It sounds like it creates fairly good results. I was going to ask, just how does it deal with the kind of complexity and nuances of language? And like, are there any areas that you feel that needs to, you need to be kind of a bit wary of and a bit skeptical of?
I mean, it's still, of course, it's very good. It's still early stages. I've noticed it's better in English than in other languages. So when you're creating content, for example, for Spanish or for French, at least in our experience, you give them a concept that for any Spanish or French teacher will be very familiar with. Like, I don't know, in Spanish, you tell them like, verbs for this group that are conjugated this way, and a teacher will immediately know what it is. And it still doesn't if you ask ChatGPT for like 10 fill in the blank exercises for this group, like maybe like 70% are within that group, and then 3 so 30% are like they're not like those kind of verbs, like they don't fit the category. So it's still you still have to correct it, but I mean, this is it learns, it's exponential, so this is something I'm sure will eventually get better. It doesn't happen as much with English. I mean, it does happen, but it just needs to get better in other languages as well, I think.
Excellent.
It's a tricky one, Alex. It's the we've spoken about this as a philosophical point, and I won't spend too much time on it, but sociolinguistic competence means that you are thinking about the impact on the audience and the context within which the communication event takes place, right? And the machine isn't. aware of that. It's blind to it. But the humans who were producing the language, which it's statistically drawing on, were, and therefore it actually doesn't do a bad job because it's only got access to contextualized language usage generated by humans for the most part. So like for specific purpose courses where you're kind of asking it to come up with a negotiation role play between a kind of supplier and a purchasing team, for example, if your prompt is specific, it does quite well. But it's all about the prompt. It really is. And the prompts can get quite long. And they become iteratively longer and longer as you kind of, just add more requirements. It's a very interesting philosophical rabbit hole. I won't go further.
My last sort of question was then on just, does it really save time? Do you feel that it really saves you time?
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, we're producing it. We're producing content now at about 60% of the time that we were before.
Okay, that's an excellent benchmark.
But I mean, that's like, yeah, that's our best users of it are producing at that rate. So I don't know if the entire team is all producing at that rate. I think the training takes time. And I don't want to rush it and put pressure on, because then I think quality starts to suffer because the editing and prompt calibration would suffer. So I think this is something that has to be experienced, to be lived, and then we'll come to the right metric. But yeah, I think it is quicker.
I agree. And also like this empowers not just curriculum developers, but also teachers so much, because I'm sure many of the participants here are teachers, and one of the things that the teachers most hate is the time that you spend creating content, preparing for a class. And yes, this just basically empowers you so much. It saves so much time in that portion of your job. So yes, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I think empowerment is a really good word, because it doesn't just help you generate content and tasks for the lessons, but it can also just be a teaching assistant in your lesson. So if you don't know something, you can just quickly ask ChatGPT, or if you have a classroom management problem, you can consult, again, ChatGPT or whatever tool you use. So it's so, that the use is so wide. It's really quite amazing.
Excellent. Well, I actually want to jump in now. And I think that almost everybody agrees that these AI technologies and ChatGPT particularly are exciting and great. And everyone wants to have at least a little dabble. But I think one of the, there's still a lot of people out there who really aren't getting into it. They aren't using it to its, full potential. Well, I'm not sure if any of us are using it to its full potential, but they're not sort of making the most of it. So why is this? What do we think are the reasons that, what are the roadblocks to, teachers, schools, tutors really grabbing hold of this technology and running with it? And maybe, Julia, maybe this is something for you to answer?
Yeah, I think so. I think, there are many different factors. First of all, it's new. So people don't know it. It's scary. And it's new, obviously it's not new to the world, but it's new. The accessibility is new. And so that is really scary. And it's scary to have a tool that can do so much more than you can do. And it makes you think that why would I even then use my skills to do anything? It almost makes people feel like they become obsolete in their skills and in their training and in what they do on the daily basis. And it takes the focus away from the teacher, because people say, why, if a student can go and talk to ChatGPT to learn Spanish or French or whatever, then why do I have to be there? And I think that's where we have to come in with the training, to really show them that this is a tool for you that you can use. It's a teaching assistant, it's a content creation tool, and for the students, it's also a big help, of course, but I don't think it can replace human interaction at all. And so that is where we come in with our training, and we show people how it's done, and we give them lots of examples. And actually we create our training through ChatGPT and don't tell them until the very end, and they go, oh my god, this was amazing, we had lots of fun in this training. And then we tell them, see, it's good fun actually, you know, create some good stuff. So, and that takes away the fear a little bit as well.
Fantastic. So I'm sorry, I was going to follow that along with sort of asking about whether you thought that it should be sort of one administrator that works with, you know, but having this training that you just mentioned, that kind of really makes it accessible to everyone. So am I right in thinking that, you know, you empower your whole team to use these programs? And, you know, what does this training comprise of? So if somebody's sitting there watching us now and they're thinking, okay, we could do that, you know, is it a day-long training? Have you got like a guideline? How is that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so first of all, I think everybody should use it in whatever form it's useful to them, whether that's content creation or something else. I mean, I sometimes use it, you know, at the end of a day and my brain is tired and I don't want to read a text. I just have it read texts to me, so I can listen to what's on the screen, kind of thing. So everybody should use it, definitely. What we've done in terms of training is we've issued guidelines to all the schools, for the directors of studies, for the teachers, how to use it, you know, sort of prompt guidelines, different examples on how to tweak our materials, how to tweak our curriculums, how to not just personalize it, but make it personal to the student. So these are the kind of things that we do. And then I sit together with the DOSes. I was in Rome actually this morning and the past few days, talked to the schools there. And then I was, you know, I go around and I talk to people and it's mostly about sharing best practice at the moment and getting people on board with it and then demonstrating what it can do to take away that fear and that sort of hesitancy.
Fantastic. Sorry, Brian, you were going to add something before. Do you want to jump back in?
It's very short. It's like Julie already gave like an excellent examples, and I agree entirely with what she said. And I just wanted to add that there's this belief in general, not just with ChatGPT. It happens with every technology. It happened with every new technology that the technology by itself will do its job, right? You just put the technology in the classroom and just let it and magic will happen. It's never been like that. So it's very important, and this is perhaps to answer your original question of why some people are not using it. And it's not the technology itself won't do anything. It's just you need to show people and you need to train people in what you can do with it from an instructional perspective, how you can use it. Like that education, that training part is extremely important. Because otherwise the technology just won't work. Like it happened with the internet, it happened with iPads. Like if you don't train educators on how to use it and how it can empower them, and especially how it will not replace them, Julia says, I also believe it will empower them, not replace them, then it just won't have any instructional results.
Yeah, and I think it's important to add here that you know, you have to, again, part of the training has to be that they know what exactly it is and how it's been trained, namely that it's been trained by humans. You know, it's just a sort of a massive collective of all of our knowledge, basically. And so it's just a huge group project kind of thing. And you know, that maybe takes the fear away a little bit as well.
I think it's important, you know, for everybody listening as well. I think you've got to be a bit careful about what you hear, you know, on LinkedIn and so on from people behind these artificial intelligence companies, because what they're doing is driving their valuations higher by making all kinds of bombastic statements about how this is going to end humanity and stuff. It isn't. These are also not things that can think, yeah, and they're not going to replace people. And these are not realistic. This is science fiction. I think you've got to get past that on an emotional level. This is a tool. It's a bit like, you know, when calculators came out with the formulas already available for children, there was a big panic in schools, you know, that were maths teachers. And it didn't change the fact that you have to pay attention in maths class and work hard, right? It just accelerated people's ability to do complex mathematics and brought us forward as a group. So I think be very critical about the source of where you hear things. This is a tool, I think it's a useful thing, and it's worth learning about to be a better teacher and educate better.
Well, my final question that I'm going to put to you is around ethics. And do we have any concerns around AI and particularly ChatGPT and ethics when we're talking about education?
Massive.
Well, that wasn't the answer I was expecting, but okay, let's go there.
Yeah, I think there are massive ethical concerns. I think whenever private business is involved in something like education, which is so critical, especially when you're talking about K-12, right? You have to be very, very careful, because there are certain things which make sense from a profit motive, right? That don't make sense for the shepherding and care of our young people and our future. So I'm passionate about this one. Yes, I think there are major ethical concerns, and I think one way to arm ourselves is to be educated, to learn. I'm almost 42 years old, and I'm still doing short courses, reading everything I can get my hands on. Like I feel half educated. I think we should all feel like that, maybe. And then we're better armed to see when swindlers try to trick us, right? I think you've got to arm yourself with knowledge, and that's how you protect humanity.
Yeah, I'll sort of jump on that as well. Like Julia, when we spoke at the inlingua conference, and I was talking on AI, I really kind of talked about being curious, and I feel like that is a really empowering way to be. So not to be so skeptical you'll never use it, but to be skeptical enough that you're always kind of looking. And I think this should also give us a lot of confidence about the future of our teachers, because when we empower the technology with the teacher, I think we all feel a lot more comfortable with this. Whatever is produced, if that is at least kind of comes through like the personality and the understanding and the kind of cultural sensitivity of the teacher, I think that can really help offset any of the kind of just raw content straight at the user. And I think that's the stuff that is both scary and totally unwise, is this just, hey, ChatGPT came up with this, let's use it immediately without me even having a quick read. So I think teachers are a huge answer to helping minimize possibly ethical questions as well. I think there's a curiosity though, and I haven't kind of worked it out. I wouldn't mind passing this to the others. There's an ethical question about, we don't know where the content's sourced from. Let's say that the source was from an original bit of text and you asked to repurpose that. I haven't even figured out in my head, what are the ethics of that? Like, the text was there. It is now completely a different text, but it was based on the original text, either its tone or its flavor. And that hopefully is, that's the result that you wanted, was that kind of came through in the next version. Is that an ethical thing? And also, how concerned should we be in terms of what's the consequences? I'm just kind of curious on that, because that's more around this kind of ownership of content and how that sort of plays out. And I'm curious as to the panel if you've thought about it.
I'm not sure about it. I think that things on the internet are more or less in the public domain.
Yeah.
And I think when you write as a creative writer, people will say, oh, I've written something and it's very, very new.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually put together from pieces of things you've read anyway. It's just that you can't pull on as large a set.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that it's ethically different.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's no difference than having your resource list or your reference list at the end of an academic article. It's you might say you've written something original, but is it ever really truly original?
Yeah.
Perhaps there's more acknowledgement of the original source when we're talking about traditional generation of text.
Yeah, even at LearnCube, we're starting to play with the concept of helping people expand upon exercise. So this was the text highlighting the certain kind of words and passages, and then asking our teacher assistant to expand on that with examples. And that's why it's quite relevant to me, because it's sort of like that the source is very clear where it's from, and the output is very clear that this is a generated output. But I'm just kind of curious as to kind of navigating this. And I'm just wondering how other education companies might be thinking of the same. What about safety? I don't know if Julia again, I've met some of your crowd, and some of them are very kind of like cautious about everything. So I'm wondering if you've had some good like safety questions. And in this case, it's around the topic of content creation.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Google issue a thing a couple of weeks ago to tell their employees that they shouldn't put strategic stuff into ChatGPT and their own Bard as well?
Yeah.
So, and I read it and I went, duh. You know, it's kind of common sense to me to not put confidential stuff online, because as soon as it's on ChatGPT, it's online and it's in that database of, you know, public data that you just talked about, Rob. So of course, the advice is to not put strategic stuff of their individual schools, of our own, you know, the main company that we have in Bern. All of these things, obviously, don't put that onto ChatGPT or anywhere else for that matter. So yeah, of course there are safety concerns. Yeah, huge ones, absolutely.
Brian, anything to add in terms of that? Also, the kind of another kind of big theme for educators across the world is ensuring that we have an inclusive and diverse, you know, what we produce is kind of helping reaffirm the global, hopefully interconnected, peaceful community that we want to live in. What do you think about that when it comes to, I think a common criticism of any AI tool is that it's made by a bunch of white, well-paid developers out of Silicon Valley. And are we noticing that in the content? And if so, what would that actually look like?
Well, I mean, I'm sure, like, I guess that, like, of course, like, most of the technology that we use is is created, but like you mentioned, like white people in Silicon Valley or whatever. But it's, I mean, I'm not sure. Like, I personally, I mean, of course, like, I mean, this is just my experience, and everyone's experiences are for sure different. I didn't have like that experience, at least in the language learning side of things, where that sort of like reflected like negatively, but I'm sure other people did across other areas. I mean, I guess that all I have to say is that this technology is exponential, so things will happen extremely quickly. So that discussion and like seeing like what the experiences that happen and doing something about that experiences if they are negative, it's something that we need to have, like, it's a discussion we need to have right now. Because the exponentiality of it all will make it like will make things develop really, really quickly. So it's basically like now or never.
I'm also just going to finish that kind of question with you, Herbert, since you have a lot of exposure to writing copy, not just in the education market, and you'll also have a huge variety of customers from all parts of the world. And how have you felt AI when it comes to adhering kind of to sort of cultural sensitivity? I mean, again, I'm assuming that that's where humans come in, is that we can kind of figure out or flag things that don't feel appropriate in any kind of content creation. But any thoughts or comments on this area?
Yeah, I mean, we use AI tools all the time for copywriting, for ad copy, for articles and things like that. And we always kind of use it as a brainstorming activity rather than copy, paste, and use it. Of course, you have to be very careful with the prompts and always iterating the prompts to maybe tweak it a little bit to watch out for those cultural sensitivities, especially if you're, you know, writing ad copy for, you know, a different culture. And so we always take 2 or 3 glances and reviews over the copy before, you know, publishing anything. But it has definitely helped us in creating ad copy and cut a lot of time from that.
Before, maybe if we can kind of see if there are any other kind of general questions from our audience, they can always put that into the Q&A. We've got some there. But while people are just putting in those last questions, I thought we could maybe just go around, and if you want to give us an idea of what your it could be what you think generative AI is going to do over the next years when it comes to content curriculum development, or your vision for it. And Rob, I know you've had the most thoughts around this. So do you mind if I start with you about what you feel is the vision for how AI is going to be impacting content and curriculum?
I think everybody will end up using it to some degree. I think it's simply too useful to be ignored. And I think that a lot of very bad quality learning material is going to be released because certain organizations will approach it from a profit angle only. So I think we're going to be flooded in bad content. But I think it'll also be used in a more principled fashion. And I think it's going to become a core tool. That's what I think.
Amazing. Brian, and then I'll follow with Julia.
Yes, I agree with Rob. Mostly it democratizes sort of like content creation, or again, because it's exponential, it's a technology that demonetizes quickly, so it democratizes itself quickly. I guess that yes, like Rob said, there's going to be like a lot of like low quality content creation, but I mean, because content creation is something that is going to be done by everyone and by a machine, it's no longer going to be it's no longer going to have so much value. So what I think this is going to do is it's going to emphasize the value of the human aspect. So what, as a human, can you add to this curriculum or to this content that the machine cannot do?
Excellent. Julia.
Yeah, I think low quality or bad content is a really good buzzword, actually, because that's what I'm worried about a little bit, that everybody's just going to sit down and create your own stuff and is not going to edit it, is not going to sort of check it against anything, and it's just going to use it, and that might have, you know, that is potentially scary also to me. But I think if we use it positively and constructively, I think everybody can massively profit from this tool. Absolutely.
Herbert and Korinne, any ideas or insights from you before we move into our last round of questions?
I think that Brian sort of hit the nail on the head there, where he said that it's going to highlight the need for the human input or the human part of AI. In my experience with AI, I've worked with schools who have used ChatGPT to create website content, and they've found that although the content itself, in essence, the theme, the topics, what, you know, the point of what they wanted to say was on point, it was missing the subtleties, like matching the voice or the brand or the identity of the school. And so that's where I came in to sort of add that human aspect and make sure that it was properly reflecting the persona or the brand of that school. So I think that it is really very, very important. Like everyone here has said, that there are some checks in place, that you don't just generate and post. There has to be the human aspect involved in the process. The benefit is that it cuts time down. So the human aspect is much more efficient. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a positive outcome for language teaching. It's going to assist teachers and instructors with creating curriculum, which means the focus is on that human element and providing an exceptional learning experience for the students.
Yeah, I'm going to back up all of these, the panel we have here. I think what we're seeing from it as a technology company is really this, how do we kind of lean in to make it as fast and easy and as high quality as we can possibly make it. And I think that's also a role where technology companies like LearnCube can kind of play a role in making sure that the content that we do create is as good as we can possibly make it, and really empower teachers to make that work. But I think the key thing that I keep on hearing is the importance of that human moderator, that human channel. And I have a lot of faith that our teachers are going to do us really, really proud over the years ahead. So we will finish up with just any last questions that might be in our Q&A and chat. Let's just check out here. I'm not sure if anyone knows of any plugins to help with CFR level, and actually how important is that, in fact, because a plugin would sort of indicate sort of that you're kind of doing it automatically, but a lot of the time, if you put anything into a tool like ChatGPT, you can just ask it to either assess what level it is or turn it into whatever level you may want. If I'm missing something, let me know on the panel.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, that's what we do. So it's included in the prompt. It does an okay job, but we do a bit of manual editing just from experience. And then we also have some other tools as well, where you can sort of cross-verify that certain vocabulary set or whatever is, or a text is level appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I only hire people who've taught for years. Like there's nobody in my team who hasn't, because you can't replace that.
Yes, I mean it's more or less the same experience for us. I think that yeah, like Rob said, it does an okay job. You need to I mean we had to feed it the rubric to get, if you really want to get like see a CFR like a precise CFR assessment. So as long as you do that, so again, a plugin, I'm sure that's very easy to create. You just feed it the rubric and then you add it. It's very I mean, if it has the rubrics and the standards, it does a good job. Yes.
I think also just pulling from Rob, your ideas, and Brian, your ideas as well. I think and I think teachers already do this in their own teaching, right? You have this almost your own notepad of what works for you. You have that notepad. In your case, Rob, it's almost at a company level. Hey, this is like the best practice. You said in Notion, you kind of like have these are the prompts that we use.
The workflow.
You have
that
and,
work.
Yeah. And same with you, Brian, you have the same. And as a team, you kind of try and iterate and improve on those over time. And then of course, every teacher will have their own kind of cheat sheet and shortcuts. And I think that's where like good materials as that base is still going to be extremely important, because that's kind of the consistent quality, but then you kind of augment and expand those. Anything else we have in the question area? I'm just having a look here. This is kind of an interesting question, but I think it really kind of hits on what are we comfortable, or how much should we be relying on AI or not? So what would you say to a K-12 language teacher who's concerned that the student is generating full graded assignments through AI? So I guess it's like sometimes where you're kind of like, I got it to do stuff, and look, here I have these amazing assignments in 5 minutes.
I know what I would do. I used to be a high school teacher. I would get them to defend it live. Yeah. And just come sit with me and we go through it. And then I will ask
Exactly.
questions. They will love that.
I think that's a great idea. I think everything else would just be counterproductive. You know, you're just gonna foster fear, and prohibiting it is not gonna help anyone. And if anything, you need to teach them, you know, how to use it properly, how to be critical of it, and how to edit the outcome.
I feel this sort of hits the main theme anyway. Like even when we were talking with the LangTech book, Brian, we were talking about how speaking is so important. And what is speaking? It's this live interaction and discussion. And you can't hide behind any kind of AI tool to do that. Like I can't have an avatar of you, Brian, to suddenly defend or to explain why you think, you know, AI should have an impact on content and curriculum, and for me to believe that. So AI is never going to be able to no, I'm assuming that AI is never going to be able to do that, in which case this kind of idea that you had, Rob, is totally on point. It's because that's how people are evaluating real language capabilities is, you know, can you stand in front of me and debate?
You probably haven't read it, Alex. You know, I mean, I was a high school kid, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like they own that. They're accountable for it. They're putting in the world with their name on it. And I'm quite serious about that as a teacher. I take it seriously. So then they must go through it line by line. They must justify to me registered choices, like cause and effect statements, like, and it'll happen once and they won't do it again.
Yeah. And is there a point? I guess that this is sort of part of if you can generate content as well. When we're talking about cheating as a kind of broader topic, it's always the piece that comes in with AI. Is there anything there that any of the panel wants to bite into a little bit? What does cheating mean in the world of AI?
I mean, I find this highly interesting because it has only highlighted that our education system is just very, very, very old. And Definitely. You know, people just they've always found ways around it. They've always found ways to cheat, and then, you know, the institutions have tried to stop those ways. But in my opinion, I think we should again go a similar route to what we just discussed with the K-12 example. You know, just teach them how to use things effectively, and that is a much more valuable skill than what we've been teaching so far, I think.
Definitely. There are so many other ways in which a student can demonstrate that they acquired knowledge or that they gained a skill. Yes, that are basically cheat proof. Like it's yes, so it's not really like the problem is not really the students teaching. The problem is the system, like Julia said.
Right. Well, this feels like a good place to finish. I really want to thank thank the panelists for a fantastic conversation. We really went through a lot today, and I'll make sure that there's a recording available. But let me just pass around to say my massive thanks to those on the panel, starting with Rob Szabó. Thank you so much. Where can people find a little bit more about what you're doing?
I will put my LinkedIn page in the chat, and please just reach out to me, connect, and that's probably the best way. And
yes.
I'm quite active, and I like to talk to new people, so yeah, we do it that way.
Excellent. Check out Rob at Learnship. Julia, how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn, so I'm always very happy for people to get in touch. I'm very open to collaborations, and just if people have questions, or I might have questions, I think conversations in these times are hugely important. So please do get in touch if you're interested.
Brian.
Yes, same thing. I'm just going to put my LinkedIn here in the chat. I'm probably not as active as Rob, but still do reach out, and yes, we'll definitely connect at some point.
Excellent. And don't forget to check our LangTech book, right, Brian? You can learn about, you can learn all about us.
Yes, of course. Yes, so I'm just going to, if I can find it, I'm going to leave that here in the chat too.
While that's happening, Herbert, how can people find you?
Sure. I'll drop our URL for our marketing agency in the chat, as well as my LinkedIn profile.
Korinne?
Yep, I'm going to join the LinkedIn train and say, find me on LinkedIn.
And
I'm the only one there with this name, so you won't get it wrong. Otherwise, I'll pop my email address actually into the chat.
Amazing. And you can find more about me at www.learncube.com. We do these language leaders live webinars each month, so please join us for the next one. Herbert and I have a podcast called the Get More Students podcast. If you're interested more in the marketing side of things, we've also had some fun conversations about AI and marketing. And just make sure you stay in touch, and really look forward to us helping you further. And I'm really excited about having these further conversations as AI develops and the new world emerges. So thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.